And welcome to New Battlefields. My name's Eric Belardo, and I'm known as Cyber Papa out there in the industry. Today's show is all about how companies protect themselves, how they create security champions. So if this is interesting to you, stay tuned. And welcome back. So I'm so happy to have you guys here for the show. Today we have a very exciting show. I'm going to bring in my co-host here, the Cyber Warrior. Cyber Warrior, how are you today?
Doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing amazing today. I want to thank everybody for joining us. I see a bunch of people out there watching us. We got Alberto, we've got Alpha Cyber, and some other folks out there. So welcome to the show. There you go. All right. So now today's show is all about creating cyber champions. See, I'm telling about how these companies that are out there protect our information and how they do what they do. So with that, I'd like to introduce you guys to Alyssa Miller. And Alyssa is a hacker, security researcher, advocate, international public speaker, over 15 years of experience in this field. And she's a member of the Women in Cyber, the Racial Equity Committee. She is a member of ISACA and is a CISM. So also a great friend and an awesome human being. So welcome, Alyssa.
Hey guys, how are you?
Doing awesome. Thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Anytime. So, Cyber Warrior, say hello to Alyssa.
I'm just. How's it going, Alyssa?
I think I've seen you familiar. I think I've seen you somewhere before.
It's possible. I think I've been around. I think we've been on the same show once or twice.
Maybe. That might be it.
So, Alyssa, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell our viewers about you.
God, what didn't you tell them already? Let's see. Like you said, I mean, a hacker, researcher, that's kind of where I've been my whole life, since as far back as I can remember. I was always the kid that took apart my toys to figure out how they worked. I bought a computer at age 12 and broke into Prodigy. Like you said, I've been in security professionally for about 16 years. And a lot of different roles, right? I mean, I started as a pen tester working in financial services. Then I got into consulting, did a number of years in consulting, worked for a VAR for a little while, worked for a product company for a little while. And now I am back in financial services. I am the Business Information Security Officer for S&P Global Ratings.
Oh, wow.
Huge.
I've done financial services with the World Bank, and trust me, that's one of the hardest ones to be in. So
has its unique challenges. Let's put it that way.
Other than medical, well, that's different story. That's for a different show.
Then now you're talking life and death when you're talking medical. So yeah, there's still a little more pressure there, I think, if we get into the healthcare field.
I spent about 8 years doing medical stuff. So as a security guy. So it was fun. So we were talking earlier about the concept of security champions and, how companies are developing their talent and how they're developing, these leaders from zero, coming out of college or getting their certificates and developing into security champions. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so I mean, I think Security Champions was kind of born from the idea, well, two ideas really. One is just push left, right? Let's find ways. How do we bring security earlier in the conversation? And I mean, for the almost 2 decades that I've been in security, we've been screaming push left, push left, push left, push left. I mean, it's been a mantra as long as I've been in this game, right? The other piece then is I think it's really formed because we've kind of given up in a certain sense, right? Within security, it's like application security in particular. Most organizations have far more developers than they do, and then we're talking orders of magnitude, far more developers than they do AppSec folks. So they're pumping out software at a far faster clip than we can possibly keep up with. And so Security Champions kind of became this idea, well, we don't have enough AppSec people to cover all of these, development teams. So what if we just started coaching up folks within those development teams who then could serve as kind of, our first level of security expertise, if you will, within the team itself. So let's, instead of trying to hire hundreds of security people, which we know no organization is ever going to go for because, well, that's a cost center and cost centers don't get that kind of money. Why don't let's leverage where we can get the money, and let's create devs who have more of a security focus, and we can empower with some of the responsibilities that fall under that AppSec umbrella.
Yeah, that's really interesting because back in 2014, I was working for a big medical software company in Kansas City, and they had a staff of close to about 5,000 developers. And we were only 4 AppSec people. And when we got in there, we said, we need to develop a security champions program. And what we did was within each one of the development, we picked one person that had interest in it. And we started training them just basic OWASP, here's how you run Web Inspect or App Scan or something, and then just hand us the reports so that we can analyze it and then give it to you. It was still a lot of work, but it seemed to help a little bit. How are you guys implementing things like that in other agencies?
Well, so what's funny is we're going to find out at S&P right now. I am literally right in the throes of creating this, and we are as an organization. So it's kind of interesting because we've got kind of a not necessarily unique, but kind of this structure where you've got sort of the centralized organization, and that's where the CISO's organization lives, right? They're up there in that central corporate structure. But then you've got all the business divisions who are essentially just 4 different companies who were brought together under this one umbrella of S&P. And so within each of those divisions, there's that need, there's building up the security champion at that level. And so that's one of the things that already is looking kind of interesting, because I think for each division, how we do it is going to be a little different. From my perspective within my division, one of the things that's most important to me anytime you create a security champions program is understanding that it is a program, right? I mean, this isn't something where, hey, we're just going to train a bunch of people and throw them out there and let them do things, right? I mean, that would be okay, but that's not really what you're looking for. You're not getting the value you should. The way I've always looked at security champions, and even back to my consulting days when I was doing this in other orgs, is it has to be a community. Right? You want this to be a community of these people who kind of have their own, I hate to say it, but almost like little clique that they, and because then they get together, they talk, maybe they have different forums, whether they meet on a regular cadence, they have private groups in the corporate Teams or Slack or whatever you're using, they have those areas where they can communicate, and they communicate across divisions, across Scrum teams, whatnot. So that now you're sharing information and ideas and tactics and techniques and things all across. So now you really start to get the value of it. And, that's one of those things that I've been stressing as kind of just an early on as part of my proposal for how I want to do this, is that's what I want. I want to build, I've got, oh God, I can't even think how many Scrum teams we've got in ratings right now, but it's in double digits, probably nearing triple digits. So I want them all interacting with each other at that security champions level. I also want security champions within my division talking to the other divisions, because we all have our unique challenges and we're all finding ways to overcome them. But at the same time, there's a lot of commonality we can leverage too.
Yeah,
And
for
how?
sure.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I mean, it's one of those things, and I think all of us in security, or at least many of us in security, preach this beyond, internally working with IT, which has been something that I've been big on, is you have to work with the IT departments. If you're going to have these security champions in different departments, they only serve a purpose if you're working together. So, because we all think differently, we all have a different way of looking at things, or evaluating, or, whatever the case may be. And we may find something in research. So if you don't share this as a commonality, if you don't bring them together and honestly let them have their click, let them have their, hey, we're security, this is who we are, this is what we do, you lose a lot. But by having that capability, then it gives them the opportunity to bounce ideas off of each other. And I think that's huge. And it's something that that's one of the things I love about working in a security consulting company, is we're constantly doing that, but we're all security.
Yeah.
So in organizations, it's a completely different premise and concept, but to have them in each different, essentially, business entity is amazing.
So I've got a question for you here.
All
So
right.
you've got these developers that you're now going to empower as security people. How do you keep them motivated so that they want to do this and kind of be the pain in the ass to their fellow developers?
Well, one, I hope they're not a pain in the ass. They shouldn't be. They should be the thing that's helping the other developers, right? They should be kind of greasing the wheels by, hey, now we've got security expertise embedded. I don't have to go running to the AppSec team to get answers to architecture questions. I don't have to wait for my AppSec team to, verify this false positive. I've got somebody in my team that can do those types of things for me. But keeping them motivated, and I'm glad you asked the question, because again, thinking about this program wise, if you think all you're going to do is throw, some computer-based training, God, there's an old term, a bunch of online content at them, and they're going to study up, they're going to read about the OWASP top 10, they're going to learn how to use Burp Suite or Fortify or, whatever tools you're using, and that's going to be your program, it's not going to happen. Because you're right, they're not going to be motivated. Most of them are not going to be motivated to try it, let alone want to stay with it. So one of the keys, and this is a conversation that has to occur early, is we need to structure, what does this look like from a career progression perspective? Like there should be, you can't take a senior developer, make them a security champion, but their title stays as senior developer, right? You've got to have compensation and title that go with it. You got to have incentives that go with it. What are the things? How are you going to incent these people to want to be and to continue to be a part of it? Some of it is monetary, yes, but not all of it. Think about just from a recognition perspective. Maybe, think about it even from just visibility within the organization. Do you do security events where you allow the security champions to organize it and they can be speakers at it? Do you give them the opportunity now, because they are developers who do security, to get out and speak at conferences outside of your company? Are you going to pay for them to go out to AppSec Cali or, B-side, whatever city you want to go to, or, whatever. These are the things you want to get them involved, because those are the things where now they see, hey, this is something that's building my career. I know cybersecurity is in demand. I don't want to get away from development. I'm getting to do both, which is really cool.
Yeah, for sure. And I think on that note, and especially because you mentioned like monetary title and things like that, as I know quite a few developers, and you don't get really taught the security aspect of things. You get taught how to make things work. Do the blinky lights blink? Does the program do what the customer wants it to do? So when you get to that level, when you can recognize security, it's a whole different can of worms, and it's a whole different level of thinking. So it should not, and it should never be a lateral movement. It should be a promotion. It should be something that says, "Hey, I've reached this level, and now not only do I know how to code or program or whatever you want to say, but now I know how to do it securely. Now I know how to look at these programs and say, "Hey, look, you got a buffer overflow right here." And some of these people get so good that they don't need a fuzzer, they don't need any other tool. They can literally go through the code, read it, and be like, "You got an issue here, 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 and here," and you're like,
Like
what?"
old static something?
Right? Static code analysis.
Yeah.
But it's crazy because you see so much of this, and I truly think that so much I've really kicked around because in security we always talk salary, and there's always these weird job requirements and them looking for unicorns and this, that, and a third. But I think in certain areas, especially when you're looking at AppSec, that's one of those things that should pay well, and it should pay better than your developers because you have hit that level of your career where you recognize these flaws. You're able to fix these flaws that when you first started out, you would have never seen.
Yeah, I mean, how many people do you know are happy being told you need to take on all these extra responsibilities, but we're not going to pay you anymore, and we're not going to give you any better title than what you have today?
Yeah.
Raise your hand if that's something you're going to be happy with. I don't know anybody. So, that is one of the mistakes I've seen is people get into, hey, we're going to build the security champions program, and they don't plan that, like, okay, there is like a whole piece of this that has nothing to do with training and, process. You really have to show what, and there's got to be a progression too, right? Like, I mean, if you're really going to do this right, it can't just be, oh, you become a security champion, so now you have this title and you're getting paid more. Well, okay, but now where do they go from there? Is there a progression that, are there multiple levels of security champion? Is
Yeah.
there a progression that now they can move into, say, eventually your pen testing team or an AppSec team or, whatever you have within your security organization? You want to have that all laid out in advance. I mean, that's HR 101, right? Like, here's your career map. This is where you can go from here, and let them see that. And then it just becomes, how do you manage this? And this is, I mean, a lot of this, again, this is all just like basic leadership stuff
So,
here.
so for something like that, though, who I'm gonna ask my question, but there was a comment in chat that made sense, and it's from Zoltan. Zoltan, sorry, I don't want to butcher your name, but and there it is. And probably they need some level of authority so the team accepts their inputs. And that's where it comes in, where we talk promotion and things like that. You have to be given authority. But saying that, does this become a whole different, do they fall under different leadership as a unit, or do they still fall under, what leadership do they fall under at that point? Because if you're going to promote them, so are they at the DevSecOps bosses level? Is it kind of they work hand in hand, or DevOps rather, or are they above him because now they're security and should be able to check all the work? Like, where does that fall in line in terms of something like that?
So I like this. I'm really glad we went here because I'm going to say something that's going to blow you away. I don't think they need organizational authority. They need authority, but think about where the authority comes from for a minute. If you're doing it right, at least, you've got things like engineering standards, security standards, things of that nature that they're already responsible for being told that they have to do. Or maybe you even have cool things like break the build in your pipeline, where if you run a build and then the static and dynamic analyzers run and they find too many vulns, it kicks back and their build fails. All of those things get easier when you have a security champion. So the security champion is there to help them resolve those things, help them get better at coding so they don't bang into the wall of a failed build on a security check. They don't, run afoul of security standards, and now they have to revisit what they've coded, or they have security findings or whatever else, however you handle those violations of standards. All of those things that create all this ancillary noise that's so frustrating when you're a developer, because I just want to write cool new stuff. I don't want to be dealing with fixing bugs and having to deal with security flaws in my bugs in particular. Your security champion being part of making that easier, reducing that friction, gives them that level of, I'll call it credibility rather than authority. They have that credibility to influence what's happening. They don't have to sit in a position of authority, because what you don't want with a security champion is the thou must do this, coming down on them. You want someone that's in the trenches with them, that just brings the context and the credible expertise to help them get faster and better. So authority from an organizational perspective could actually almost be dangerous in this sense.
Yeah.
So more credibility versus authority.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's authority, but it's a different type of authority.
Yeah.
You don't, we say authority, we think, well, people have to report to me, and I'm the manager, and so therefore they have to do what I say. No, it's authority that comes from the fact that they're helping with these standards, that what they're pushing for is driven by your standards, your processes, all those other things.
So it's influence and leadership, not dictatorship.
Exactly. I mean, now you want that road to leadership, right? To actual organizational leadership. So let's not say that there's no level of organizational authority ever in this. That's, again, back to that career progression thing, right? Like, they've got to be able to, how do you structure this so that now you have, maybe lead security champions that others, maybe report to from a people management level, or maybe, at some level you have that type of leadership. But I don't know that you ever really want them. I think that still becomes more dotted line. I don't think you want that, because the whole point of security champions is that they are a part of the Scrum team. They're a part of the engineering.
That's what Mary just said. So if you look at the message there.
Oh, perfect. Yes.
Yeah.
There we go.
It is. And to me, that's more of a military mindset, is the whole, I'm going to be in the trenches with you. So when I came up, I've been in a lot of positions until the job I have now, where your boss was your boss. They weren't in the trenches. They weren't doing the same things you were doing. They really started getting disconnected from what you had going on a day-to-day basis. And so they were more boss and manager. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's just the type of leadership it was. Whereas in the military, we had at least I had true leaders that they were able to do and would do the exact same things you were doing. Yes, some of the menial tasks were left to lower enlisted, but generally speaking, they had to do it too. They had to do a lot of the same things, or at least be able to do a lot of the same things. Now, if they got tied up in something higher up, that's a whole completely different can of worms. But, it happens when you reach those levels. You get tied up doing paperwork or interviews, whatever the case may be.
Right.
It happens.
But yeah, let me play with that a little bit.
Yeah. And that's why I love where I'm at now, because even my boss now is like, dude, what do you need help with?
Yeah, I mean, let's play with that for a second. So, thinking about that, I'm going to use this military thing for a minute. Think about who you felt more loyalty to. Did you feel more loyalty to your NCOs who were there on the lines with you, or, those guys and gals up the chain, who, were wearing stars and maple leaves and shit, and they're way back there behind us? I mean, who do you actually feel the loyalty to?
It's those on the front line with you, and you'll see that a lot. You're even in the infantry. I had a lot of infantry buddies and Marine buddies and things like that. Your officers, as much as we make fun of like lieutenants, and we do, you can't spell loss without LT. We make fun of them, but a lot of the times they were the ones on the front lines with you. They were your officer out there with you. So you felt more respect for your NCOs and those frontline officers than you did the ones back in the tent that were just calling orders. Yes, they earned their rank. Yes, they earned their way up, but that's not who you were loyal to. You were loyal to those out there fighting with you. And it's the same way we feel now, where you're loyal to the leaders and things like that in industry that are there with you doing the job, or at least they are competent and capable of doing the job if they had to step in and do it.
Yeah,
And
and
I know
in
there's
30
lots of
years
people.
doing this, oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I know there's lots of people out there laughing at me too, because I realized I said I'm apparently been hanging around too many Canadians lately. I said maple leaves. You know what I meant? I meant oak leaves.
Oak leaves, yeah. And did
I
you see
realized
it?
right after I said it, like, oh, I totally misspoke.
Yeah, there you go. I put my army hat on.
Yay!
Okay. No, so what? So now that we have the people in place, they are supporting their people in the trenches. There's motivation to do a good job and career progression and all the other things. How are you empowering these security champions with tools? So how do you make their job easier? And now we're getting to the DevSecOps piece. And how do you empower them?
So a big thing that I alluded to before, first of all, is just that automation in the pipeline, right? I mean, when people think CI/CD and DevSecOps, and a lot of times tooling and going right to Kim, thank you, Kim, love you. Yeah, I mean, we do go right to automation, but that is a part of it, right? Sometimes we become over focused on that, but really, truly, the automation is part of it. But you don't necessarily, if you can't get to the automation, it's at least having that self-service model, right? So I mentioned before this idea of false positives. And how do you handle false positives? Inevitably, anybody who's ever used a SaaS tool knows, the real struggle of false positives. And so, in most organizations, ours included, when you have that situation in a traditional structure, all right, your devs get a report back, they can't go forward with promoting their code until they fix these vulns. They look at them, they say, oh, this is a false positive. Now they have to report that to security. Security has to take a look at it. They say, okay, yes, this is a false positive. We'll remove it from the report. You go through that whole process. Well, when you have someone built in and you give them that authority, I call it accountable trust, right? So you trust them to do it, but you also set that precedent. Look, you are accountable for this. You're signing off when you mark this as, non-vulnerable, false positive, whatever you want to call it. That's on you now. And, you're the one we're coming back to. If that comes back later in a pen test or something else, that comes back as, okay, here's an issue we found. That's on you. Like, I mean, we're not going to fire you. We're not going to take disciplinary action, but be aware that those kinds of things, hey, we're going to be tracking that. And, those are performance metrics we watch. We do expect you, if you're going to validate that something's a false positive, you need to actually validate that it's a false positive.
Yeah, for sure.
So in the CI/CD pipeline, are some people do the check-in, check-out, and that's when they do their security scanning, and then the security champion checks the stuff. Are you guys doing, with the security champions in mind, are you guys doing anything else, having them do spot checks or having them do anything and use the DAS tools or the SaaS tools out there to look at what's going on other than when things are being checked in?
So we're going to see where that plays out, right? Because the other side of this that I have beyond the security champions, I like them to stay a little further left, right? Like, I think that whole false positive conversation is probably about as far right in the pipeline as I ever want them to be. Now, what I do have is a wonderful QA team who is chomping at the bit, quite bluntly, to be a part of security testing as well. That's where I want to see that occur, right? Because it is, like you said, we're doing the tools in the pipeline. We're running the tools on build, on check-in, depending on which tool we're talking about, and that automation is growing within our particular environment. And I think that's what everybody's trying to get to. But yeah, you do still want that capability to throw a little more human intelligence at it, or a little different perspective. If, most QA teams are automating a lot of what they do too, but the types of test cases that they're able to execute are a little different than the traditional DAST and SAS tools.
Yeah, and you don't want them to become push button.
Right. Nobody wants their job to be just pushing buttons. I mean, as much as QA teams love to automate, they still love to be a part of testing. That's why they're there, right? I mean, they do that presumably because they love the job. And so, there will always be that piece. And of course, there's always going to be the pen testing that you do post-production, or, that sort of thing. I mean, you want to do the ongoing production environment validation too. So I don't think any of that goes away or becomes really much different. But those are other areas that, of course, again, just like with your security champions, you're trying to continuously improve all aspects. And that's really, I like this comment that's up there right now, just about, the over reliance on automated tools. And that tends to happen with CI/CD in particular, because again, you mentioned CI/CD to devs. How do you build CI/CD pipelines? Oh, well, you automate everything. I mean, literally, that's typically the answer. And it's okay. Let's get beyond just automation, because we can't always automate everything. So how else do we achieve CI/CD if we can't automate everything? What are other aspects? Other things that we can build into the pipeline that still essentially keep it moving in a continuous fashion.
So I want to go back to the security champions and what, how you're bringing a developer who traditionally, all developers code for functionality, and they don't even get taught coding for security. So now you've got a senior, mid-level, junior operating as a security, champion. What is the training, or what is the first thing that you're training them on?
So first and foremost, it's just the tooling, right? I mean, you want them to be able to, whatever they're going to be responsible from a tooling perspective, they need to be able to execute it. And the way that I put this out there is, think about just kind of your maturity progression in terms of security within AppSec. Like, you kind of start off, it's real ad hoc. Then it starts to be driven by compliance. Then as you get better, okay, now we start looking for ways to, exhibit cost savings or other things, leverage security for, and our security initiatives are focused around that. And the goal, of course, is to get to the point where you've got that culture-driven security. So to get from like ad hoc to that next step, you need the compliance piece. How are you governing your security tooling and processes and things within the pipeline, and bringing that to the devs? They need to just understand that piece first. And quite honestly, that is in and of itself difficult. Just getting them used to this idea that, look, hey, you're going to submit your code. When you promote that and that build happens, that tool's going to run. And if it finds too many critical vulnerabilities, or however you set your criteria, look, you're going to have to go back and recode. We're not going to let you promote. So, just getting into that mode is really the start, because now what that does is that sets up your security champion, right? Because now your security champion becomes a bit of a savior, because they get in there now and they start helping those devs understand, all right, look, here's how we're going to get it so that you don't hit that wall. We have these, I started at the user story, threat modeling in the user story, your threat modeling that you do at the user story level and at that scope. We're not threat modeling the whole damn system. We're just doing the user story. That feeds into your controls requirements, right? So now I know, because I have these threats, I have to create these controls. Those control requirements now translate, if you're in the ideal world, to your reference architectures, where it's like, hey, I need to implement, say, an OAuth, OID, authentication authorization. So I've got a reference architecture for how I do that in Python, if I'm building with Python, let's say. And so now it directs you to that. But now that information continues because that's stuff that you can put into YAML that can then feed into your testing tools. It can feed into your QA tools. And eventually down the line, that feeds into your monitoring. So now you've demonstrated, and your security champions are the ones that are helping drive this and helping the developers understand how to leverage that.
So how do you teach them about the vulnerabilities? So I'm trying to come up to the OWASP type, format. These people probably, know about it tangentially, but how do you bring a developer to learn about what they need to be seeing, not just what's happening on the tools?
Oh yeah, for sure. So as part of the whole program, you do need to introduce training. Now, fortunately, where I'm at today, we have developer training already, where they're at least getting some level of training on like OWASP top 10, those sorts of things. And I mean, that's what we always proclaimed for years was what we had to do. Oh, we got to train developers on secure development. And funny, it didn't actually work out so well because no matter how much you train them, there's not really a motivation there to really worry about it, right? So that's where now the accountability and governance comes into play, where you start to hold them accountable. You're breaking builds, you're doing other things, so that drives them to want to understand it a little better. But that's the stick method. So you also need the carrot method, right? How are you going to encourage them? So what do you do from badging perspective? What do you do, certification wise? Are there actual certifications? Unfortunately, there's not a lot of like secure developer certifications available in the industry. Hey, CompTIA, if you're listening, please, that would be great. Could we do that, please? Or I don't know. You guys aren't sponsored by a cert company, are you?
No.
Should I be
No
okay.
sponsorships here.
I just want to make sure I'm not like pissing off the sponsor by mentioning the wrong company. But seriously, I would love to see that. We don't really have that yet. And I mean, that would be another thing that could really drive, better behavior across the industry, quite honestly. But so in any event, but there are things you can do from a training perspective. But again, the key is to having kind of a progression and having some incentives. And incentives have to be more than just gamification. They got to be more than just, cool little digital badges that they can put. Those help, but attach some freaking money to that, right? Yeah. Attach their goals to that. Most organizations these days, performance-based management, hey, you've got goals, you've got to hit them. And if you hit them, you get a bonus and, great, wonderful. Tie that into completing some of that security training. And,
I don't see those bonuses like that.
People hate it when you give them extra money. They hate it. It's horrible. They always give it back. I have so much trouble giving people money.
I think, but and this is a conversation we had where it's really hard to quantify and put a number or a salary on security, because hear me out on this, because of the fact that we come from various backgrounds, right? So some of us have come up all the way, like you, Alyssa. I fixed my first computer, broke and fixed when I was 7 years old, and came up through IT and help desk and sysadmin and networking and all that other stuff. So, I spent my time there and then got into security after. So I feel like that lends to the experience side of things. However, in security itself, I think a lot of us, when we get into security, always want to make that six figures. Like, we want to jump into it and make great money right away. When the fact is, if you don't have any IT experience to lead into that first security role, then it doesn't necessarily quantify into the money that a lot of people think you should get paid just because you're in security. And I think that's a misconception where people are like, oh, I should get 90 grand right now. When it's like, actually, maybe 80. Like, I'll give you 80, but 90 out the gate for a junior, it's kind of pushing it. But I know people that want to do that, You know what I mean? And it's just one of those things that I think that if you're coming from a different career field, completely different career field into this, there you unless you can truly quantify and qualify why you deserve the amount of money that you want to make, if you're just coming in with basic education, whether it be a certification or not, you make the junior pay, right? And I don't think junior pay is 120 grand a year.
Yeah, but so let me throw this at you though. If I've got a developer who also has demonstrated security experience, so they're a capable developer and they've now just demonstrated that they have security expertise enough to truly understand secure development and to execute it, are you telling me any organization in this world isn't going to pay at least a six-figure salary for that? Every one of them will.
Oh no, but again, you're talking developer. You're talking someone that, to me, developer still falls in that IT infrastructure that is now security. So they have that experience and are now security. Again, to me, I fall developer, IT, sysat, whatever. They all have that experience in technology inside in some way, shape, or form that gives them the ability to know what they're looking at. So I completely understand. Yes, a developer who is now AppSec because they know what they're looking at. They know the code. They know programming. They know all this stuff. They've earned that knowledge. The truly embedded knowledge that you just don't forget. Whereas someone that comes straight out of education, you don't have that on the ground experience of.
Oh, I got you. Okay,
what's
I misunderstood where you're coming from. So yeah, I mean, entry level folks need to understand they're going to make entry level salaries,
Yeah.
right? I mean, there's
And
no
I think
two
that's
ways
where we
about
miss.
that.
I think that's where some people that are getting into security miss the point.
There are some. There are some. I mean, I've definitely experienced that as well. As a hiring manager, I've run into that. You know, the person who's fresh out of college, they got a couple certifications as part of their college experience, and yeah, they're coming in expecting 120,000 a year. Probably not going to happen. At the same time, organizations need to be really careful with this, right? Because if you bring, and this is the flip side of that problem, is organizations bring people in who are entry level and they say, yeah, we'll bring you in. Maybe they got a university outreach thing. We're going to bring you in at 65, 70, maybe even 80,000.
Yeah.
All right, great. So I bring you in at that price. And now what happens a year and a half from now, where you've got a year and a half of experience on the job, you probably got a cert or two in that time. And my company only gives 3% a year in raises. You're gone. You're out the door because now you are worth a lot closer, if not to that six-figure salary that you're talking about.
Exactly.
And so organizations, this is my biggest issue with how we hire in cybersecurity is either we won't hire the entry-level folks because we're afraid of that situation and others, or you have those organizations who have those outreach programs, but they bring that person in with the belief that that's a $60,000 or $80,000 a year position. No, you just hired a $120,000 professional. They're just going to make 80 for the first year because they're new. You have to have that expectation. You have to be able to accelerate them fast once their value goes up in the market. And that's the piece that industry misses across the board. And that's been going on as long as I've been in security. I mean, I can think back to 2009 when we hired somebody out of a university program, that exact scenario. I don't remember what the numbers were. It doesn't matter. He came in. He worked for us for 2 years. He came in at a very low entry-level salary. He was phenomenal. He was incredibly intelligent. And, the most I was able to give him, I fought for him. And I think over the course of the 2 years, he got probably about the equivalent of 8 or 9% bump. And that was the best I could get because we were doing, as financial services, we were doing 3% was the average increase. So where do you find extra money? And so he left. And I mean, the day he gave his notice, that's exactly what he told me. He's like, look, I don't want to leave, but you guys just can't pay me I can't pass up the money that I can make elsewhere,
And,
so we need to be smarter about that.
and that's a fact. I one of the second company I worked for out of the army, they didn't do raises. They didn't have like annual raises where it was like 2, 3, 5, whatever. It was, if you're doing a good job, we're going to put you in for a raise for what we feel you deserve. And it wasn't a percentage; it was a legit amount. And it was like, here's the thing: it's not guaranteed every year. So depending on how early we put it in, how things happen, it may go through, it may not go through. I went from $90,000 a year to $115,000 in one 20 a $25,000 boost in my salary in 1 year, because it was a company that he was like, how much you think you deserve? I was like 110. He goes, I was gonna say 115. I was like, let's do it. I ain't even mad at it. All right, cool.
Yeah, but
And
that's
and and that's the type of company that I like. And that's not to say every company is that way. Some companies offer benefits in different ways, whether it's sporadic bonuses through the year, like you've been doing a great job, we're going to give you a bonus. You got something else going on, we're going to give you a bonus, or they do annual bonuses. So even though you get that 3, 4, 5%, whatever it may be, you're getting these bonuses that tack on to that salary. So you keep doing a good job, you're going to continue to get bonuses and spot bonuses and things. So
that's a challenge. That's a challenge we have in the industry as a whole. Like Alyssa said,
Mhm.
most of the bigger companies can only give 2, 3,
mhm.
4% for a big raise. So what happens is you end up with people, and I'm one of them, that jumped from, they hopscotch in the industry. Um, I've worked with probably every single big four, big six, big eight company because I was in DC jumping every 18 months. And that doesn't build that security knowledge in a company.
And it
No.
And
doesn't
that's
build,
something
and I think this is a problem within our industry, and I truly do. Um, because of the ability to get paid more when you leave, it has a problem where we'll go back quite a few years where there was loyalty to the company you work for. They're paying you, they're providing a salary, they're doing all these things. In security, it is very rare to find that anymore. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it is very rare because of the fact that I'm gonna look for, if somebody poaches me for more money, I'm going with more money. That's what they're gonna do. And it's sad to see. I personally, if somebody has given me an opportunity that they're like, hey, I'm gonna give you this, and here's your opportunity to work and make money and this, that, and the third. I have loyalty to people that I respect. It ain't necessarily the money, it's the people and the team. So in order to poach me, you better be coming in 30, 40, 50 grand more a year in order to poach me, because I have loyalty to who I work for because of the leadership. It has nothing to do with the money at that point. But if you have bad management and bad leadership, dude, you take someone off from 10 grand more a year, if that, and they're gone. They're out the
all
door.
right. So we're going to stop you there with that point. We're going to do a little bit of an audience Q&A right now. Null Zen is asking,
Yes.
so do you guys recommend trying to get in with a small company that you can grow with? Alyssa, as our guest.
Boy, that's a catch-22, quite honestly, because small company, especially depending on how small, you get into a small company as a security person, yeah, you could grow with them, but those also tend to be really, really high burnout rate types of positions. Because think about healthcare is a great example of this, and healthcare isn't always small companies, but you get stuck there, you are the security person, right? I mean, you're not anymore a person who's a member of a team. You are the security person, which means one day you're configuring firewalls. The next day you're running an app pen test. The next day you're working with MFA attached to your Azure AD instance, and it's on and on and on. That can be very cool at times, but can also be horribly demanding and brutal. So there is that side of it. Startups are great because, of course, you get the equity grants and things like that. But a lot of times that equity grant comes at the expense of a salary. So a lot of times, I mean, my personal opinion would be to get into more of like a medium to larger sized organization where you're going to have a team that you can learn from, that you can work with. You're probably going to get a little more of a initial salary. You might not see the levels of increases that you would with a small, fast growing startup. But at the same time, you're going to have that opportunity to really learn a lot of things from a lot of great people. And then you can kind of expand out and look at, okay, how do I now maybe I can go chase after, something in a smaller organization where I can take on more ownership for what's going on from a security perspective.
Yeah.
All right. We have another question here. Besides just leaving a job, how can we really get them to try and invest in employees?
This is a systemic problem. This is an industry problem, and it's not even just security. I mean, what I tell people, look at the last 2 decades. So I'm going all the way back. I can think 2 decades back, we were, what does that put us? 1991, right?
Yep.
No, that puts us
No,
2001. Actually, that's even better.
Crap.
Wow, I can't do math tonight. 2001. What happened in 2001? What's the big thing happened in 2001? 9/11.
Pentagon.
9/11 happened, right? 9/11 happened, and what happened immediately after 9/11? The economy tanked. And what happened when the economy tanked? Every bit of that economic downturn was put on the backs of employees. It was not borne by the organizations. It was not borne by the executives. It was borne by the employees. Mass layoffs, cuts in benefits, cuts in pensions, all those things started to go away. 2008, what happened? Big economic downturn, same story again. All of those things started to erode away. 2000, whatever, it happens over and over again. That's been the cycle for the last 2 decades, is this idea of those pieces are eroding. Organizations aren't investing like they used to. They aren't spending as much. Now in security, I think it's actually starting to come back a little bit. We're starting to see organizations realize, because of this so-called talent gap, and that's a whole topic for a different show. Because of that, though, it is motivating organizations. They are realizing we do have to pay for people to get certs. We do have to, pay and send our people out to conferences. There is value in them going and attending a B-Sides or an OWASP or maybe even Black Hat and DEF CON. There is value to those things, right? Because they are interacting and they're part of the community. We want our people to be a part of that community that has business value for us. It's slowly improving, but even then, that doesn't necessarily impact things like raises. You still have this scenario where an organization is going to set, here's what we can afford for raises this year, and everybody, you got to make your numbers fit into these numbers that we're giving you. That's the way it works. Yeah. And unfortunately, those numbers are still too low.
Well, so Michelle is asking a question to you that's a little bit outside, but I think it's important that we answer this question. And in full disclosure, Michelle is my deputy at my current job. So, Alyssa,
I shouldn't tell her all the secret information that I have on you. I mean,
hey, I have a bunch of information on them too. Don't worry.
No, DM me. I got all sorts of dirt for you later.
All right.
I'm kidding. I really don't. So there are different ones. It depends on your needs. God, boy, is that a non-answer. But no, the value in joining the organizations doesn't come from which organization you join as much as how involved are you in it. Do you go to the meetings? Do they have local chapters? So I would suggest, looking for an org that has local chapters. WECs or Women in Cybersecurity, they have some local chapters, but they're not in every city. So if they're not, if they're not in your local city, maybe that's not the one. Look for local DEF CON groups, maybe. There are a lot of different organizations out there. Certainly if you're female, some of the women in security groups are going to be better because you have more of that representation. But the whole point of these groups is about the networking. So if you're not going and meeting people as a part of it, if they're doing virtual events or anything else, if you're not a part of those, there's not really a lot of reason to be in the group, and so that would be the bigger thing. Is I would look for the ones that if going to meetings and things is going to be your style, that they've got that. If they have a different way of creating that networking opportunity for you, great. Find the one that fits you from that perspective, and that's the one to join. I can't say that there's any one particular one that's better than the other, simply because it's a personal preference. But which one is going to attract you to be involved with it? And those are the ones you want to reach out and join.
Yeah,
So
I definitely feel the same way. Is that it's very much what you can get to, and like a lot of things, you get out of it what you put into it. So if you're only out there, hey, I'm a member of this, and you never go to a meeting, you never do anything, you don't interact with anybody, then are you really a member? Are you really getting anything out of that group other than a name, other than saying, and it's sad to say, but it's a fact.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we're going to do one more question here, and I think this one's for you, Mr. Cyber Warrior.
Oh man. Learn. No, honestly, it really is about doing your research. When it comes to pen testing, it's all about constantly learning. There's always new vulnerabilities, new ways in, new ways to enumerate, new ways to do things, new tools, tactics, techniques, everything. And if you're not keeping up with that, it really puts you behind the 8 ball. Look, as a blue teamer, I've done both sides of the fence, but in on the blue team, we're always behind the 8 ball. Hell, if you're a white hat, you're behind the 8 ball. But when you get into pen testing, you should really try getting into know what's going on in Tor, on the dark net, on all these different things, because there may be vulnerabilities, there may be weaknesses that you can talk to companies about or find before they even know them. And so, and that's a lot of threat intel type of things, but it's a fact. If they have vulnerabilities, maybe there's password leaks out there that they don't know about. If you find reused passwords or password dumps where somebody is just somehow the company got hacked previously and the password is out there, be involved with the community, be involved with those that are more on the pen testing, red team, black hat, gray hat side of things, because you'll get a lot of good information by doing that. And honestly, as a pen tester, don't be afraid to make noise. Don't be sitting there trying to be silent and be like, oh, I got to be quiet about this. No, the hell you don't. You're a pen tester. You can run Metasploit, Nmap, Nessus, you name it. Now, if you start doing red teaming, completely different can of worms.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Okay, so we're going to do a giveaway right now. As we in the organization, the show, are building a new Patreon with some new membership levels. We're going to actually give away one of our elite memberships for the show, for the channel, where you're going to get a lot of stuff like, access to our guests, access to us here, and much, much more. So I want everybody to enter in the chat there, the Practice Safe Cyber. Okay, Practice Safe Cyber. I'm going to give you guys a few seconds here to enter that in there. Okay, come on, only 3 people. Come on, type it in there. I'm going to count to 10 here. 1, 2, 3, 4, and hitting it. All right, Mary. So please reach out to me. I'll the email, I'll type it in here, and just go to info. Okay, and get me your information. Wonderful, congratulations. So
You're gonna get emails from like 7 Mary C's now. You know that, right?
I know that.
I need to name just become Mary C.
Let's see. So, Alyssa, thank you very, very much for being here, for just imparting your knowledge into the world here, and for just being amazing. I mean, amazing friend either. So, I want to thank you very, very, very much. And one of the things that I want to do is I want to remind everybody that tomorrow on the Cyber Warrior Studios channel, we have Security Happy Hour with Josh Mason, who's going to be talking about cyber supply drops. Eric, come on, you can speak. Training and certifications. So go to Cyber Warrior Studios. It's at 7 o'clock tomorrow. Great show. And I'm hoping to see you guys there. So again, thank you very much. And we'll see you next week. Thank you very much. Bye, everybody.